right, what's up, everybody? Isaac here, Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Thanks for giving us a listen and a like and a share. Leave some comments. Share it with your brother's uncle who's a civil engineer. We always love that stuff. But we're excited to be with you. Today I'm bringing my brother Mark back on the show, my frequent guest, and we're going to talk about depositions. So recently he went through one. I have definitely flirted with them on my end of the stick, but Mark recently went through one, and we want to talk about how to prepare you for a deposition if you get called to do that, and maybe some best practices surrounding that. So it's going to be a great episode. You may not think depositions are going to come your way, but usually later or early in your career, really anytime, it could come your way. So we want to get you prepared for that. So without further ado, it's going to be coming up right after this. All right, here we go. Mark, we're rocking and rolling. What's going on?
I know. Thanks for bringing me back. It's always a good time, man.
Yes, you're my frequent guest.
Yeah.
We should just have you on, the regular.
Yeah, it's always a good time.
So, the other day we were talking about depositions, and maybe as we start this, you could describe, maybe some engineers don't even know what those mean or what the context is around the deposition, but recently you went through one, so maybe you could talk about what those are and maybe how a civil engineer plays a role in those legal proceedings.
Yeah, so a deposition is part of the pre-trial procedure, right? So it's part of the discovery process. So if there's a case, a legal case that's being brought up, in my case, it was on a project that I was involved with, where one party that was executing the project, in this case was a general contractor, and an owner had some claims against each other, and they could not get those resolved, and so things escalated into a full-blown legal case that had to be vetted. It had to be we got subpoenaed for all of our documentation that we had on the project as part of this discovery process. But it's part of the discovery process in a trial when there's two opposing sides that have claims against each other, and both sides of the case are trying to establish all of the facts, right? Get everything, all the facts that surround whatever legal issues or whatever claims are being pursued in the case. All of those facts have to be discovered, and timelines have to be created, and all of the individuals that were involved in whatever issues are being pursued in the discovery process, all that has to be laid out, and it takes a long time, but the deposition is part of that discovery process to establish all of the facts and get everything out in the open so that both the prosecuting counsel and the counsel that has the initial claim, and in my case it was the general contractor, their case can be fully vetted, fully represented, and then the opposing counsel, in this case was the owner in my deposition, can also have all of the same facts, and then they can identify everything that's pertinent to the case and just kind of sort everything out. And if things escalate beyond that, then they actually go to a trial, which is the next step. But yeah, that's probably a real long way of explaining what was going on, but it's just it's all about the discovery process, establishing the facts on both sides of the case.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Maybe we could talk about what you did maybe in preparation for this, and maybe how much time it even took for you, because obviously you're working with an attorney. Some attorney has reached out to you for information. What are you providing to them, and maybe how much time that's taking out of your day, and maybe there some best practices that we as engineers should be doing to help with that.
So I wouldn't try to go to a deposition without having some kind of legal counsel, some kind of legal consultation. And usually probably the company that you're working for has some legal counsel that that they've retained, right, that handles their legal issues as they do business. Because I mean, it's just the way life is. Anybody who does business in our civil engineering arena is going to encounter legal problems, and you got to have legal advice from time to time. So, everybody's working for a firm or a company that's probably got some legal counsel, and so you want to get that individual involved in your case, of course. And then what happens is you usually you're responding to a subpoena, right? So the opposing counsel on the case that you might be on is subpoenaing all of your documentation and everything that you've had on the job. And that, just collecting all of that was kind of a pain. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's all the old emails and all the old hard copy documentation that you have, everything they have the right to collect from you. And I mean, it's mountains of documentation. I mean, this case that I was on, I mean, it was a project that lasted about 18 months in duration. And you can imagine all of the email correspondence, all of the hard copy correspondence that I generated. And it was just tons of documentation. So you have
watch out what you put in those emails.
Prepare me on what was coming, right? The type of questions that were going to be asked, but then make sure that I was fairly certain that my documentation wasn't going to incriminate us, be I don't know, anything that they could use against us in the deposition, or anything that was. He wasn't trying to get me to be, untruthful about what had happened in the sequence of events and the issues that had been on this particular project. But he was just trying to get a feel for my documentation, what it was like.
And so what happened on yours? Can you talk about that?
I can't talk about specifics, but it was a project where the owner was accusing the general contractor, and I wasn't named specifically as a party to the lawsuit. I was just called up because I was a participant in the project, and I had some knowledge about specific instances. But it wasn't. It wasn't just because it was. To ask your question again, Isaac, what was the original question?
I asked, so what happened? I mean, we couldn't get into details about this, but what are some, if we can't get into details about this particular deposition, maybe you could talk about maybe some best practices that engineers should have.
Yeah, keep my trend. There's so much stuff that happened, and I'm trying to summarize this in my head, but I'm trying to not, disclose any sensitive information either, because I can't talk about all the specifics. Well, my lawyer just went through and helped me prepare on what I can expect, or the types of questions that I could expect, and just trying to get a feel for everything that happened on the project, so that he could direct me legally, right, down this path, right, that I had to navigate during the deposition. And anything that he discussed was attorney-client privilege, right? So I didn't have to answer any questions during the deposition about what specifically happened in our consultation beforehand. And that consultation took about, I don't know, it was a half a day. It was 4 hours for us. I can imagine if there was more documentation that we had to sift through. I mean, it could take you a couple days to prepare for a deposition. It's really time-consuming.
Yeah, it sounds very time-consuming. I work for a utility, and I talked about this earlier, but they have set up policies to only retain emails and such for only a certain specified amount of years, which is what the legal requirement is. And even if you just keep it in your inbox, they will delete those things. I think it's at 90 days unless you retain them by creating folders. So some of the stuff, obviously, I was in the habit of keeping everything, but I could see legally that sometimes maybe that might bite you down the road. But maybe talk about, as an engineer, even if you're a starting engineer, you need to be a little more professional in your email responses and what you're chatting about, because if you're sending an email to your buddy 4 cubicles away how much you hate a client or something, that could come back.
Yeah. So when I was brought up in this business, I had mentors and mentorship that always taught me that, remember that any document you produce during the course of a project it's basically submissible in a case in a court of law. And so just not that you can't be truthful and straight to the point on whatever you're communicating, because as engineers, we're usually trying to communicate maybe a technical issue or offer our opinion on why something should proceed in a certain way or a certain sequence should happen, say on a construction site for a project. Just make sure that the emotion is out of it, because there's always times when things aren't going your way that you could get into an emotional rant right on your email, like this project manager is an idiot and I can't stand him, and I just and just start just venting about all of your frustrations on an email. Well, if there's an issue that arises that down the road and somebody has a claim and it specifically involves that issue that you went on your emotional rant about, that's submissible in court, right?
Yep.
And then opposing counsel that's representing the other side can bring that up and essentially kind of question your judgment on an issue, because they could say,
the right person for the job. Why
you went on this, crazy, did you say these things about, so-and-so? And you can't deny it because it's right there in black and white.
Whoopsie.
So that would be my advice is all good projects have to have good, thorough documentation, but just make sure you've taken all of your emotion out of your documentation, because it can come back and bite you.
I would even add, we see the rise of teams and chat rooms. All of that can be used too. There's a reason why your employer is using that stuff. It's easy to communicate, but it could also be recorded as well. So
that's right.
So a lot of the complaints typically that we hear are that engineers are too technical when they're trying to describe things. What strategies do you have to communicate complex subjects effectively? Or is there any?
Yeah, I was asked a series of questions that I would say are a little more technical questions. There were a lot of questions are just straightforward. Do you know this person? Do you remember producing this documentation? Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, a lot of things led into technical explanations. And I would try to read the room. Like if how sometimes I get off on tangents and you have to keep me straight, even on our little podcast here, Isaac, right? So I have to
bring it back,
resist. Well, I have to resist, like, I don't know, describing things too much, going into too much detail. Yeah. So if I start seeing the room, like their eyes start glazing over, and it looks like I think, I'm getting too far down in the weeds. I got to back it up a little bit. But I don't know. I try to put my teacher hat on, right, and think, okay, how can I explain this in a more of a, I don't know, a basic way, or relate it to common things that everybody understands, and try to get through it that way. But that's a hard thing, especially if you're, I'm not bragging. I've done this for 25 years, 26 years now. And so I know a lot of stuff about construction. And so I can expound on a given topic for a long time, but I got to read the room,
Yeah.
I'm going to watch to see if everybody's getting glazed over. And then if I can see that, then I got to back up and
Well,
think about explaining it more simply. I don't know.
it's good advice. It applies really to any discipline, right? You're heavy into construction. There's other disciplines out there that you can get involved, that any other civil engineer could get hammered in. I'm in the transmission world, and people have been deposed on a variety of things. Typically has to do with land, or someone built something underneath the power line, and fingers start pointing. So I'm curious, have you ever encountered any unexpected questions or something that took you off guard, or do you feel like you were well prepared?
I felt like I was pretty well prepared. My lawyer, apart from going through a lot of our documentation that was subpoenaed and just kind of making sure that, I understood what was all involved, the emails, the drawings, everything that was submitted. Aside from understanding that, just, I don't know, Isaac, it was understanding kind of the fact that the opposing attorney was going to try to lead me in a certain direction, right? He's taken all of the documentation on both sides, and both sides of the case, both lawyers on both sides of the case do this, but they're looking at all the documentation, everything that they gathered during the discovery process, and each of them have a claim, right, against the other, and they're trying to compare all of that documentation against the claim that they've got, and so they isolate those items that they think bolsters their claim, right? It backs up their claim. And so the opposing attorney is going to question you in a way and bring up only those things that kind of bolster his case, right? And so
see it through their lens.
Yeah. So what I learned is to try to figure out what their lens is, what is he trying to lead me down? They're always trying to lead you down a certain line of logic with their questioning. And if you can kind of identify that before you get there, it helps you be concise with your answers. And I don't know, it helped me just not only be concise, but I don't know, not because in a deposition, you want to just be like straight to the point, concise. If you can answer a question with a yes or no answer, then that's what you do, right? You want to have to be led into further explanation, but only to the extent that the opposing lawyer is questioning you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So if you understand the direction that he's going, you can kind of identify that as he's leading you down this path with his questions. It kind of helps you make that just succinct and short, and your answers just give them the information that they require, and that's it. Don't go off on tangents and expound on a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, because it may actually lead him, it may bolster his case, right?
Yeah.
He may discover more information that bolsters his case, and then he can ask you more questions that go down a completely different line of reasoning. And so I don't know, it's just a weird thing, because the longer I was there, I was a little bit nervous, when we started, but the longer I was there, I could kind of detect the direction of his questioning. And once I could figure out where he was going with his line of questioning, it helped me just be more succinct and more direct in my answers. That
Yeah,
make sense?
that does make sense. It sounds like you've done this a few times, but have there been a time or two where you're like, "Oh man,
I shouldn't
have done that. I shouldn't have gone that long."
There was a couple of lines of questioning that I, looking back, I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. But the fact that I was just direct, and again, you're just trying to answer everything with yes or no answers if you can. The fact that I was trying to be as succinct and just as brief as possible with my answers, it helped with that. It helped me not go down, weird tangents, which, like I say, I can do. I can ramble on for a long time about engineering.
So, has conflict ever come up in these things, and have you had to deal with that? I mean, you talked about taking emotion out, and it sounds like that's the key with all of this.
Yeah. I mean, definitely with your documentation that you produce during a project, for sure. Take the emotion out of everything. Even if you're trying to like just blast somebody in your email for a big mistake that they've made or something, make your points, but don't put emotion into it. But during the deposition, there wasn't. I haven't really had like any big confrontations. I mean, as you're going along, your lawyer is sitting right next to you, and he or she is objecting to any questions that the opposing counsel is asking you that may be out of line. Anything that is maybe attorney-client privilege, your attorney will say objection. But what's weird is even though they object, you still have to answer the question that's been answered. So the court reporter that's in the room with you that's recording everything, he or she just records the objection, and it's weird because you still have to have an answer to that question. It's not like the objection like stops the question completely. You still have to answer it. But
yeah, that's interesting.
But so there's that dynamic going on, and then the other attorney that's in my case, there was the attorney that was questioning me represented the owner. And the other attorney that represented the general contractor in this case was also in the room. And he was just waiting to have his turn at questioning me. And he didn't have the right to object. Just my attorney that was representing me did. But I never got any like real confrontation where emotions got really high and everybody's like, we need a break and we got to calm down. It never got to that level. I'm sure there's cases, in depositions where that could happen.
Sure.
That didn't happen in mine.
Okay. Awesome. Well, this has been great in detailing what a deposition is, best practices for engineers. If you're out there listening to this, maybe take note of some of these items. Make sure you're documenting things well, and you'll be ready, I guess, when the time comes. So any last second tips, Mark, you'd share with anybody?
Yeah, just I would just say that, a deposition is, I was worried about it the first time I did it, but it's nothing to be worried about it. And as long as you're just, you're telling the truth, which is what you're required to do. And you get your legal counsel with you and get you prepped for the deposition. And then if you're kind of assured that in the back of your mind that you never produced any documentation that was, that had emotion into it, right, that could be brought against you in that proceeding, you're going to be fine, right? Just answer things truthfully. Try to be as succinct and brief as you can. And then if you can understand the direction that the questioning is going in, if you can figure that out, and that happens as you get more experience and you get deeper into your deposition, that helps you be more succinct and more brief in your answers, and it just helps because you don't get off on these tangents like I like to do. You're brief and you just answer the question straight up. So
perfect.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for jumping on and sharing your experience with depositions. I'm sure others will enjoy listening to this if they ever find themselves in your shoes doing this. So thanks for jumping on and doing this one.
Okay. Thanks, Isaac.
All right. See ya.
Bye.